Welcome to the Chronicles of a Cheating Wife channel. A new story every day. Don't forget to subscribe. She used to run her fingers along the back of my neck in this gentle, almost absent-minded way, as if soothing me after a long day. It was our silent conversation back then. A touch that said, "You matter. I see you." I remember the warmth of her breath near my ear and how I'd close my eyes, letting my worries float away in that small moment of closeness. Sometimes she'd lean in and whisper something mundane like, "We're out of milk," but her voice would have a softness to it, a promise that even small details could be tender if shared together. Then suddenly, not so long ago, I was screaming. My throat was raw, my cheeks burning. She stood across the room, arms folded over her chest, eyes half-lidded with a hint of impatience. A single overhead bulb flickered as if uncertain whether to illuminate us or plunge us into darkness. And then, God help me, she laughed. This short, breathy laugh, more exasperated than amused, but it sounded so cruel in that moment. My ears rang with the echo of it. The clock on the wall ticked in the silence afterward, each second scraping across my nerves. I remember choking on my own anger, wanting to fling words at her that would cut like knives. But my voice just wouldn't solidify. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the dark window. A man unmoored, fists clenched, breathing too hard, sweat on his brow. It was such a contrast to the calm, rational person I'd been for the last decade. I almost didn't recognize myself. That was the moment I realized something irrevocable had snapped between us. She used to see me. Now she looked at me the way you'd look at an annoying neighbor who'd rung the doorbell at midnight. She was Evelyn, my wife, the mother of our 10-year-old son, the woman who once made me believe in forever. She was also the person who shattered every idea I had about loyalty and trust. And that laugh, Lord, how it haunted me. Even now, remembering it, I feel a wave of nausea roll through my gut. I stumbled back a step, away from her half-smirk and locked arms, away from the stale light of that single bulb overhead. The living room felt smaller than ever, suffocating. My eyes landed on the coffee table where her phone lay charging. My gaze darted there, to the grainy video paused on its screen. The damned footage my own son had shown me on his iPad just the day before. The part where she sat on a park bench, but not with me. With him. I saw her dress, one she bought on sale only a month ago, hiked a bit too far up her thigh, his hand disappearing under its hem. Her face turned upward, lips parted with a giggle I'd never heard from her before. It was shocking how painful that giggle was, more so than the sound of him kissing her neck. The phone's volume had been off when I first saw it, but I imagined the wet, intimate noise. My cheeks flared hot with jealousy and disgust. Evelyn, my wife, sat with her knees touching another man's. Ted Spencer. Local investor, big-shot moneyman, patron of the arts. Her business associate, she used to call him. I'd known of him, of course, even met him once or twice in fleeting social settings, but never realized how intimately he had woven himself into our lives. Now I swallowed and stared at her across the living room. She stared back, unwavering. She took a single breath, parted her lips as though she wanted to speak, but said nothing. So we fell into silence again. In the hush, I heard the slow, relentless ticking of the old wall clock my parents gave us as a wedding gift. Past that, I heard the faint hum of the kitchen light. My heartbeat throbbed in my ears. I wanted to break something. I wanted to lash out. But I didn't, because men my age, men raised in a certain tradition, we're told not to cry, not to let ourselves crumble. We're taught that tears and heartbreak are for weaker souls. So I clenched my fists behind my back until my nails bit into my palms, and I locked down my voice. She was the first to move. She brushed a hand through her hair, those chestnut brown waves that used to be my comfort. She walked away from me as if my presence was no more threatening than a breeze. I stood there, fists throbbing, mouth dry, anger pounding in my temples. But the moment that changed everything came later. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, Didn't even remember falling asleep. The TV was on mute, rolling through infomercials. My back ached. My breath smelled sour. I heard the whistle of the kettle in the kitchen. Evelyn was already up. I smelled coffee, felt the tension in the air like a cable stretched too tight. The local paper lay on the counter. I froze when I saw the front page photo. Ted, smiling in a tailored suit, with Evelyn at his side, his arms snug around her waist. The headline read something about a local art gallery opening, praising Ted's generosity and calling Evelyn his muse. That word, muse, singed my thoughts like acid. I stared at it, numb. My wife was in the newspaper, pressed against another man, beaming like she'd won the lottery. I picked up the paper and brought it to my face, practically biting the corner, not caring about the bitter tang of ink. Evelyn stood across from me, sipping coffee, eyes flickering with guilt, embarrassment, maybe both. Her expression was impossible to read fully. Everything after that blurs together, until the moment I found myself at my laptop, writing. An open message on social media, me punching the keys so hard I thought they'd break. Good luck in bed with another man's wife. I typed, my anger spiking with every word. You're no muse, Evelyn. More like a fly stuck on the shiny sponsor's boot. And the mud on that boot is more honest than you'll ever be. I knew it was petty, impulsive, savage. But in that second, I didn't care. My insides burned. I posted it under his official announcement about the gallery. Hardly a minute later, the notifications exploded like fireworks on my screen. Comments, replies, likes, shares. Some outraged, some mocking, some egging me on. Then came his reply. Dude, who the hell are you? That flung the door wide open. Suddenly, it was a public spectacle. People demanded details. I provided them, carefully the way a surgeon might handle a scalpel. I described the park bench video, so conveniently captured by a random bystander, and circulated online. I posted screenshots of the still frames. I said enough to ignite a blaze, all the while ignoring Evelyn's messages piling up in my inbox. The next hours were a whirlwind. Ted's supporters attacked me, calling me jealous, unhinged. Others took my side, condemning him as a homewrecker. He threatened me through private messages, telling me to delete my posts or face consequences. I posted his threats. The fury escalated. Strangers poured in with their opinions, some extremely cruel, some weirdly encouraging. Evelyn's messages in my messenger were paragraphs long. She tried calling, leaking voicemails. I refused to answer. Deep down, my chest felt hollow, my mind spiraling with conflicting emotions, rage, heartbreak, betrayal, a sick sense of triumph at exposing them both. But over it all, a hollow ache. How could she do this to me, to our family? Meanwhile, I had a son who'd unknowingly opened Pandora's box by saying, Dad, look at this, with his innocent eyes locked on that iPad. He was at school now, but soon enough, he'd see the chaos or hear about it in some shape or form. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I couldn't stop. I typed more, posted more. My timeline was a battlefield. My phone rang off the hook. Every beep of a new message was like a jolt of adrenaline. I was in a fight, a very public fight. For my dignity, for my pride. Evelyn was in the next room, pacing, stepping out to the porch, then coming back in. The floors creaked under her light footsteps. Sometimes she hovered behind me, trembling, wanting to speak, but I refused to meet her eyes. At some point, she said quietly, John, can we talk, please? I snapped back without looking up, got nothing to say. Her breath caught. I heard a soft rustle of her blouse as she shifted. I'm sorry, she whispered, but I only typed faster, as though my words could drown her out. It was petty. It was cruel. And it was the only way I knew to cope at that moment. By the afternoon, local social media was on fire. Ted started losing his temper publicly. He posted videos calling me a liar, a pathetic husband who couldn't keep his wife satisfied. He threatened to sue me. The blowback grew more vicious by the hour. The tension was almost more than I could bear, but an odd satisfaction gripped me. Everyone knew he was unraveling. He was showing his true colors, an arrogant big shot who roared when challenged, and I was the one holding the match to his fuse. Evelyn kept sending messages. "Let's discuss this privately. I never meant to hurt you like this. I still love you." Each one was a stab in my chest, but also a reason to hate her more. My mind replayed that video, her lips parted under his kiss, her body leaning into him like he was oxygen. In the early evening, I stepped away from the computer for a moment. My nerves were frazzled, eyes burning from the screen glare. I needed air. I walked outside, noticing how the old porch steps squeaked under my weight, how the neighbor's dog barked faintly in the distance. The sky was bruised purple with sunset. I inhaled deeply, hoping the crisp air might bring clarity. But the second I closed my eyes, images of them in that park assaulted me. Her dress, his hand sliding up her thigh. My fists clenched, nails digging into my palms again. A tremor ran through me. That's when Evelyn appeared behind me. "You can't freeze me out forever, John," she said, voice quivering but firm. I didn't answer. She laid a hand on my shoulder. I shrugged it off. Then she tried again, stepping around to face me. Her eyes shimmered with tears, though she wasn't bawling. She was too proud for that, usually. But something in her gaze was undone, raw. "Please," she said, "I need you to listen, even if you hate me." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. "You had your chance," I muttered. "You had a million chances." She nodded, lips pressed together. "You're right. I know." She paused, tears rolling down her cheeks now. "I never meant for you to find out like this. I never meant for it to go this far." My face twisted. "Oh, so you wanted your little affair to stay quiet. That's what you mean by never meant." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "You and we drifted apart, John. You barely looked at me anymore. You were always." The frustration I'd bottled up erupted in a scornful laugh. "Don't you dare blame me for your choice to open your legs to that bastard." The words came out harsh, burning my tongue, but they were unstoppable. She inhaled sharply, tears shining in the porch light. The house behind us was dim, the interior only faintly lit by a lamp we'd left on. The crickets outside chirped relentlessly, unaware of the life-altering conversation unfolding on that old wooden porch. She whispered, "I'm so sorry." I stared at her, my jaw clenched, my voice shaking with anger. "Sorry doesn't cut it." Silence. We both felt it like a lid weight. Eventually, she stepped away, hugging her arms as though suddenly cold. I turned and gazed into the distance, at the silhouettes of trees, searching for any sign of relief in the night sky. None came. Inside, my phone pinged and chirped, no doubt with more messages, more notifications. The chaos continued, but in that moment, I felt only a profound sadness. That was day one. Over the next few days, the storm online raged unabated. Ted escalated with threats of lawsuits, defamation claims, and ugly name-calling. I stoked the fire, releasing snippets of evidence, timestamps of texts, partial screenshots of his flirty messages to Evelyn, even an audio clip I found on her phone. In it, he was whispering sweet nothings, calling her my muse, praising her body. I cut it before it got too explicit, but it was enough to scorch any doubt. The public was ravenous. People love a scandal. They devoured every scrap of drama like wolves. My wife tried to reach out to me privately. Phone calls, handwritten notes left on the kitchen table. I ignored her. We were strangers in our own home, passing each other like ghosts. Some nights, I slept on the couch. Others, I left and drove aimlessly until dawn threatened. But I was also careful with our son. I didn't want him near this hurricane of betrayal, so I tried to shield him, making sure he stayed at a friend's house or with my parents when things got too heated. Evelyn and I spoke only about logistical matters, mostly by text, to keep from screaming at each other in front of the boy. It was a slow spiral into madness. Part of me knew that. I was letting my rage control me. But I had never felt such raw pain. The shame of being replaced by a man who was wealthier, more influential. The humiliation of discovering her moans in that video. Moans that once belonged to me alone. The relentless comparison. His suits were more expensive. His arms more muscular. His world bigger and more glamorous. It galled me to the core. And men, especially men like me, who grew up hearing real men handle their business quietly. We don't cry. We lash out, or we bury it. I chose to lash out. And God help me, I set the entire town ablaze in the process. A week later, I was sipping black coffee at 5 a.m., the bitter flavor matching my mood, my hands trembling from lack of sleep. The newspaper carried yet another photo of Evelyn and Ted, praising the gallery's success, but also acknowledging the swirl of rumors online. Some journalist had written an article referencing the messy entanglements of local art consultant Evelyn P. My stomach lurched at the initials, at the public spectacle. I tore the paper in half and tossed it aside. Evelyn, who had just woken up, stood in the doorway in her robe, watching me. She looked exhausted, hair disheveled, eyes red. We stared at each other without speaking. I wondered who she was now, to me. An enemy, a regret, a love long gone. Eventually, she mumbled, "I'm meeting with a lawyer today." I nodded. My voice, rough with early morning huskiness, came out flat. Figured as much. She hesitated. "Can we keep it civil?" "For our son." I stared into my coffee. "I don't know how." "Not yet." She exhaled and left the room, robe trailing on the floor. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The confrontation with Ted came unexpectedly soon after that. He showed up at my doorstep one afternoon, pounding on the door. The doorbell rang incessantly. I just returned from a quick grocery run, arms full of bags. Heart pounding, I set the bags on the counter and walked to the front door. Through the window, I saw him. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a perfectly tailored jacket, eyes blazing. I could practically smell his cologne through the door. I opened it, and before I could speak, he shoved a piece of paper in my face. "You see this?" he barked. "It's a cease and desist letter. That means you shut your damn mouth, or I'll bury you in legal fees." I felt a jolt of adrenaline spike through me. "Get your hand out of my face," I said, voice trembling with barely restrained rage. He practically spat the words. "You think I'm gonna let you slander me all over social media? You think I don't have the resources to end you?" Behind him, I noticed the neighbor's curtains twitch. A car slowed down, probably curious about the commotion. The last thing I needed was a brawl in my front yard. But damned if I was going to let him intimidate me. End me. I repeated, letting a derisive laugh slip out. "You ended yourself when you decided to grope a married woman in broad daylight." He scowled, face reddening. "She was your wife. But that marriage was over a long time ago. Don't act like I'm the monster here." I stepped out onto the porch, shutting the door behind me so our son, who was in his room, wouldn't witness this. I lowered my voice. "You better leave," I warned. "Right now. Before I do something we'll both regret." He loomed over me, but I refused to back down. A tense moment passed. Then he chuckled bitterly. "If it wasn't me, it would have been someone else. She's bored with you, man. Bored out of her mind." "That's not my fault." A spark lit inside my skull. My knuckles itched to smash his arrogant jaw. Instead, I inhaled sharply. I might have done it if the door behind me hadn't clicked open and Evelyn hadn't stepped out. She looked from him to me, eyes wide with alarm. "Ted, you shouldn't be here," she said, voice shaking. He turned to her, a flicker of hurt in his expression. "I'm trying to protect us from his smear campaign." She shook her head, tears welling. This was never about some grand romance, Ted. It was just a moment, a stupid, awful moment, that stung me more than I cared to admit. Ted let out a scornful snort. "You said differently in your texts." Evelyn's eyes darted to me, guilt coloring her cheeks. My fists clenched, nails digging into my palms again. Ted turned back to me, brandishing the letter. You have 24 hours to remove every slanderous post, every humiliating comment, or I'm taking you to court. I glared right back. Do what you want. My voice sounded calm, but inside, a tide of anger rose. But every threat you make, every vile message, I'll post it. I'm documenting everything. You think you can bully me with your money? Let's see how well that plays out in front of a judge. His jaw tightened. He looked at Evelyn one last time, shaking his head. Then he stormed off, spitting curses under his breath. The roar of his car engine soon tore down the street. Evelyn stood there, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks, arms wrapped around herself. We didn't speak. Even breathing felt difficult. Then she whispered, I never wanted it to go this far. I watched her, feeling the old ache, wanting to hold her and push her away in equal measure. My mind replayed her pleas from days earlier. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. But all I saw in that moment was her in that video, her body canted toward him. That breathy laugh, that look in her eyes. I stepped back. You should leave too, I said, voice hollow. I can't look at you right now. She inhaled a shaky breath. Where would I go? I stared at the sky. Anywhere that isn't here. She sniffled, bit her lip. I'll pack a bag. I didn't answer. She slid past me, back into the house, footsteps echoing across the floor. I stayed outside, even as the sun started to set. Light drained from the horizon, and the wind picked up a chill. I barely felt the cold. That night, she left. Took her car, a small suitcase, a box of personal items. Our son was staying with my parents again. They didn't know the full story, but they sensed the marriage had hit a brutal crisis. I told them I was just busy with a tight work deadline, that we needed a little space. My folks accepted it for now, but I knew sooner or later they'd demand explanations. Alone in the house, I wandered the rooms in a daze. Our wedding photo on the mantel stared back at me, two smiling faces from a different world. The ring on my finger felt heavy. Upstairs, the bed was unmade on her side. The duvet was tossed aside, her pillow still carrying a faint scent of her shampoo. My chest constricted at that, my eyes burning with tears I refused to shed. The next morning, I decided to take my revenge up a notch. I know how that sounds, cold, vindictive, but I was a wounded animal, cornered, lashing out. I opened my laptop, ignoring my pounding headache and the stale coffee in front of me. I began to write. A story, my story. Every detail of how I met Evelyn, fell in love, built a life, the birth of our son, the small arguments that grew into gaping distances, then the betrayal. I wrote it in raw, unfiltered language, not for pity, but to document every wound in my heart. I posted parts of it online, linking them as chapters. Readers lapped it up like it was the best new drama in town. Some told me to get therapy, others offered words of encouragement. Some scolded me for airing my dirty laundry in public. But I pressed on. The more I wrote, the more I felt a twisted sense of control. A day later, Ted fired back with a massive post of his own, calling me a hack, an attention seeker, a man unhinged. He posted screenshots of messages Evelyn had sent him. Messages full of longing, complaints about me, her calling him my escape. My heart clenched when I read them, but I recognized her phrasing. It felt like a blade twisting in my gut. The social media scene became a battlefield, with onlookers fueling the conflict for entertainment. The tension soared. Evelyn stayed silent in the public space, but privately, she pleaded with me to stop. She asked me to consider our son, who would one day read all of this. But anger had a strong hold on me. Days turned into nights without real sleep. My hands shook from too much caffeine, not enough rest. I was consumed by it. This drive to outdo Ted's threats, to scorch the earth if necessary. There was a perverse satisfaction in seeing him panic, hearing rumors that some potential investors were pulling out of deals due to the negative PR. He tried to save face, but public sympathy started leaning in my favor. People saw me as the betrayed husband, the father trying to keep his family. But it all came to a head one night when I stumbled on my son reading comments on some site. He looked up at me with those 10-year-old eyes, tears brimming. "Dad, they're saying horrible things about Mom," he whispered. "They're calling her names." That moment sliced right through my rage. Here was the person I loved most in the world, caught in the crossfire. I felt suddenly ashamed, standing in the living room with my laptop open to a rant about Evelyn. I realized I was hurting my boy, twisting his view of love and marriage in ways that might haunt him forever. I knelt down, gently closed his tablet. "You don't need to read any of that," I said softly. He sniffled, wiping his eyes. "Is Mom coming back?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice cracking for the first time since this all began. He looked at me, searching my face. "Do you still love her?" My throat tightened around a wave of emotion. I reached out and hugged him, not trusting myself to speak. He clung to me, trembling. I realized that in my obsession with vengeance, I'd nearly forgotten the real damage being done. To him, to all of us. That night, I barely slept, but not from anger. This time, it was guilt, sadness, and a sudden urge to protect what I could. I woke up in the early hours, sweaty, disoriented, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint buzz of the outside lamp. I walked into the living room and saw my reflection in the blank TV screen. Eyes bloodshot, hair disheveled, face gaunt. I looked a decade older than I was. A broken man. A father who'd let hatred overshadow love. So I made a decision. The next morning, I started cleaning up. I took down most of my public posts, replaced them with a single statement. "I won't be commenting on the private matters of my marriage any further. This is now a legal and personal issue." The online mob was incensed, but I didn't care. I did it for my son, and for the shred of humanity still left in me. Ted crowed about my capitulation, but I ignored him. I also blocked him from messaging me directly. Evelyn texted me, asking to talk, to meet. I didn't respond right away. It took me another day to muster the courage. Finally, I told her we could meet at a local diner, Neutral Ground. The diner was nearly empty when I arrived. A couple of truckers sipped coffee at the far corner. A waitress with tired eyes offered me a menu. I declined, asked for coffee, my stomach too knotted for food. Evelyn walked in a few minutes later. She looked pale and anxious, but still graceful in that natural way. She slid into the booth across from me, eyes heavy with regret. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The overhead lights flickered slightly. The place must have had an electrical issue. An old jukebox in the corner glowed, silent. Outside, cars rumbled past on the highway. Inside, the hush between us felt thick as tar. Eventually, Evelyn took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know you're sick of hearing that. But I am." I nodded slowly, hands wrapped around my coffee mug. My jaw felt stiff. "Why, Evelyn?" I finally asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Why him? Why this?" She teared up. "Because I felt invisible," she said. "You were always working, always locked in your head or your writing. I felt like you didn't see me anymore." And Ted offered excitement, attention. He made me feel alive, like I was something special, not just a worn-out wife. Her voice cracked. "That doesn't excuse it, I know. But that's the truth." I stared at the swirling lines in the worn tabletop, heart pounding. "We could have talked. We could have tried to fix it." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I was scared it was too late. And then one thing led to another, and I let it go too far. My throat felt tight. Memories of better times washed over me. Her laughter at a 4th of July barbecue. The day we brought our son home from the hospital. The time she fell asleep on my shoulder during a long car ride. It felt like a different world. We both sat there, each carrying a heartbreak of our own making, or maybe just the breakdown of something that had once been beautiful. I swallowed. I hated you, I confessed, voice trembling. I hated you so much these past weeks. But seeing our son cry over the filth online, I can't keep living in that hatred. She let out a sob, trying to stifle it with her hand. Do you think, is there a chance we can ever? I shook my head, tears burning behind my eyes. I don't know. Right now, it doesn't feel possible. But we have a son, and he deserves more than a war zone. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. We sat in silence again, two broken people in a cheap diner. The coffee turned cold, untouched. After a while, she breathed in, then asked, "What do you need from me, John?" I closed my eyes. The overhead lamp buzzed softly, and the waitress coughed from across the room. "I need space," I said. "And if you care about me at all, or about our boy, I need you to cut ties with Ted. Publicly, privately, all of it." She bowed her head. "I will," she whispered. "I already ended everything with him. Told him to never contact me again." I believed her, or at least I wanted to. A flicker of relief spread through my chest, tempered by the mountain of pain still lodged inside me. We talked a bit more, going over how to handle separation, how to protect our son from the worst of it. By the time we stood to leave, we were both drained, eyes rimmed red. I paid for the coffee, left the diner feeling heavier and lighter at the same time. Ted posted more garbage in the following days, taking victory laps about how he backed me down. But I ignored it. My lawyer told me to let him spin his wheels. Public opinion turned on him more and more each time he raged. Investors distanced themselves from his aggressive behavior. Word on the street was that he was losing deals. I felt a grim satisfaction. But I didn't feed the fire. I focused on my son, on stabilizing our home. Evelyn stayed with a friend for a while. We communicated mostly about child arrangements and finances. I guess that's the stage after the worst storm. Damage control. One afternoon, I sat in the living room, the same place where I'd once screamed at Evelyn, and she'd laughed. This time, the house was quiet. The clock ticked on the wall, but it didn't feel suffocating anymore. I stared at my laptop screen, an open document in front of me. I was writing again, but not for revenge. This time, it was more like journaling, capturing the last few weeks of madness in detail. I needed closure. It was tough. Each sentence forced me to relive the searing betrayal, the meltdown, the public circus. But it also helped me see how far I'd let my anger drag me. I didn't regret exposing Ted. He deserved to be unmasked. But I regretted how I'd sunk to his level, how I'd lost sight of what truly mattered. My son, my peace of mind, my own self-respect. That night, Evelyn came by to pick up our boy for a weekend outing. We exchanged stilted pleasantries. Before she left, she hesitated at the door, looking at me with an emotion I couldn't quite name. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. I shrugged. "I'm breathing," I said. "That's something." She nodded, then gave a small, sad smile. "If you ever want to talk about anything." I closed my eyes, exhaling. "I'll let you know," I said. Then she was gone, and the door clicked softly behind her. I posted the final chapter of my story a few days later, part confession, part apology, part reflection. I didn't name Evelyn or Ted anymore. I'd done enough of that. Instead, I wrote about a man who let his world revolve around his pride and ended up choking on bitterness. I told the truth, that love can die if it's not tended, that we can become strangers under the same roof, and that betrayal slices deep. But I also admitted my share of failures. My phone buzzed with responses, but I avoided reading most. I'd had enough of the crowd's opinions. By then, the media frenzy died down. Ted's threats of lawsuits fizzled. Evelyn quietly severed professional ties with him. I heard rumors that his real estate deals lost traction, that his name was mud in certain circles. A part of me felt satisfied, but I no longer needed that satisfaction the way I once did. I was tired, spent. At some point, you realize the revenge doesn't fill the hole in your chest. It only distracts you for a while. Several weeks later, I sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee as the morning sun streamed in. My phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. "We need to talk about our next steps." I stared at it for a moment, dread and relief mingling in my gut. Next steps. Maybe divorce, maybe counseling, maybe something else. The details were still uncertain, but I knew we couldn't stay in this limbo forever. I typed back, "Okay, tomorrow, let's sit down." And for once, I felt a glimmer of acceptance. A man can still stand tall even when his heart is battered. We don't have to bury our pain and rage. We can learn from it, maybe even find a path forward. That evening, I scrolled through the final version of my personal account on the affair, my raw, unvarnished words capturing every grim detail. I noticed how it ended on a note of honesty, not hatred. I hovered over the delete button. For a few long seconds, I weighed the choice. Then, with a steady hand, I pressed it. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. I stood by the bedroom window, feeling the slight chill of pre-sunrise air. Outside, the horizon was streaked with faint light, a new day creeping into existence. My reflection in the glass looked older, but perhaps wiser, maybe a fraction more at peace. The world was quiet. No ticking clocks, no flickering lights, no roiling digital mobs. Just the hush before everyone else woke up, the hush in which a man can hear his own heartbeat. I closed my eyes, letting that stillness settle inside me. For the first time in what felt like ages, I wasn't bracing for a fight. I wasn't consumed by images of her with him. The ache remained, but it had shifted, dulled by time and introspection. Somewhere in the house, my son slept. In a few hours, he'd wake, rummage for cereal, maybe ask me to watch a show with him. And I'd say yes. I'd say yes because it was time to start living again, to be his father in every sense. As for Evelyn, we would talk. Maybe we'd find a way to salvage something, or maybe we wouldn't. But either way, I'd face it with clearer eyes. The rage had burned out, leaving behind a battered soul that was ready, if not to forgive entirely, then at least to move forward. That's how it ended. Not with a final shout, not with an explosion, but with a quiet moment before dawn, my breath steady, the coffee machine clicking on in the kitchen, and me standing there, determined to keep going. In that hush, I realized I didn't need to be the perfect husband or the perfect victim. I just needed to be me, flawed, hurt, hopeful, a man who survived betrayal and found the courage to keep living. And for a moment, the weight lifted from my chest. I exhaled, opened my eyes, and watched the sun push a sliver of light over the edge of the horizon. It was a new day. I was still standing. And that would have to be enough.